everybody, it's Kimberly. I'm an eternal life student, which simply means human. At the end of the day, that really is the only title that we need. I think people are like walking books. We each have our own stories to share, and by sharing them together, we grow stronger. And today I have a guest who will be sharing hers. Her name is Maura Hechim, and she's going to be discussing Tourette's Syndrome Awareness Month as well as Mental Health Awareness Month. Thank you so much for joining us, Maura. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it. Yeah, me too. And if you could please introduce yourself to everybody, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Certainly. As you said, I'm Maura Hechim. A little bit about myself. I grew up in New Jersey with three other siblings and moved to California shortly after college and joined into the biotech field for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And then I shifted gears and am a successful small business owner. And I do volunteer work for various ministries that deal with like cancer or mental health and stuff like that. And I'm
Oh,
a
that's
strong
wonderful.
advocate for Tourette syndrome as well.
That's really great. It sounds like you've been doing a lot. So let's start off this conversation with what is Tourette syndrome? Not everybody is familiar with it.
Thank you for asking that question. As you said, it is Tourette Syndrome Awareness Month coming up soon.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read off of the information off the website just so that
Yes.
I'm getting it correct because they keep adding stuff and
Hmm.
I'm learning all the time on this too. So we're going to learn together
Yes.
what some of the new stuff
Perfect.
is regarding it.
Okay, great.
Tourette syndrome in itself was identified by Dr. Guy de la Tourette in 1970. And since then, a whole lot has been learned about that, as well as a lot of other conditions that are related to it.
Hmm.
Tourette syndrome itself is a neurodevelopmental disorder, excuse me for that
Hmm.
word, that affects children, adolescents, and adults. The condition is characterized by sudden involuntary movements and or sounds called tics, and these
Hmm.
can range from mild and inconsequential to moderate and severe, and may even be debilitating in some cases.
Wow.
Tourette syndrome is one type of tic disorder. Tics are primarily symptoms of a group of childhood onset neurological conditions, collectively known as tic disorders, and
Hmm.
individually as Tourette syndrome, persistent or chronic motor or vocal disorder, or provisional tic disorder. And these three tic disorders are named based on the types of tics present and by the length of time that they have been present. And that's important from a diagnostic point of view.
Okay.
So for in terms of diagnosis, Tourette syndrome, also known as Tourette's disorder, involves at least two motor tics and at least one vocal or phonic tic that have been present, not necessarily at the same time. The
Hmm.
tics may wax and wane, meaning they increase and decrease in frequency, but they have occurred for more than 1 year.
Okay.
And they can start to appear before the age of 18. And they're finding even like toddlers are starting to express it now
Wow.
that we're aware of it and know to look for it.
Hmm.
It's been as low, as toddler age.
Okay.
They're not caused by the use of substance abuse or other medical conditions. It's a neurological
Mm.
condition.
Okay.
Persistent or chronic motor or vocal tic disorder has either motor tics or vocal tics that have been present for more than 1 year, but you don't have both. That one
Okay.
was, I did not know that. And then a provisional tic disorder, motor and or vocal tics have been present for less than a year and have not met the criteria for TS, persistent chronic motor or vocal tic disorder. So you have basically a preliminary diagnosis until they see how your tics develop. Do they get motor and vocal or one or the other?
Right. And you can have one type.
It's one or the other.
In those other categories. But for
Right.
Tourette's, you usually have a
It's both.
combination, right?
Yeah, you
Hmm.
have both motor and vocal
Yes.
for Tourette's. So to define it, a motor tic is any movement, whether simple movements can include like eye blinking, grimacing, jaw movements, head bobbing. You'll see my head, shoulder moving, shoulder shrugging, neck stretching, or arm jerking are common. What's referred to as a complex motor tic involves multiple muscle groups at the same time, So examples of this would be hopping, twirling, jumping, skipping,
Oh,
stuff like that,
okay.
clapping.
Mm-hmm.
And then same thing for the vocal and phonic tics. You have simple tics that include but are not limited to sniffing, throat clearing, grunting, hooting, shouting. And then complex tics would involve phrases or words that may not be recognizable, but they consistently occur and they're out of context for the conversation because they're involuntary and the person's unaware of their occurrence in most cases.
Okay.
Complex vocal tics are the words or phrases. Um, and there's a few types of motor and vocal, and I'm going to go over those as well. The
Mm-hmm.
one that is portrayed most commonly in media, especially early on, which caused a lot of stigmatism, was
Mm-hmm.
is called coprolalia, and that's the one that they call it.
Yes.
So Tourette's is nicknamed the swearing disease
Yes,
in
I've heard
early
that.
media because
Mm-hmm.
in coprolalia, your involuntary and uncontrollable utterances of obscene or socially inappropriate language.
Okay.
Um, but that actually only occurs in less than 15% of those who have Tourette's. They found out as they learn more about it, it's actually a rare occurrence.
Okay.
Um, and I'm going to butcher these words. I apologize ahead of time. Palilalia is
Okay.
an involuntary repetition of words, phrases, or sentences,
Okay.
whereas echolalia is characterized by an involuntary repetition of words, phrases, or sounds that others have spoken or you heard.
Okay. Echo. I get
Yeah.
it. Okay.
So pally is just random words. Echo, you're echoing what you heard. And
Mm-hmm.
then and those can occur right away or even hours or days later, which is like it's
Oh,
a very
wow.
strange
Something they
aspect
heard
of
and they just say it later?
yeah.
Wow.
And then this is a new one. Clazomania is
Okay.
compulsive shouting that is often associated with coprolalia. So they may be shouting a word.
Oh.
I
Okay.
actually met a lady one time at a Tourette's conference who would shout, jump, and jump. So she'd shout,
Mm.
jump, and then she would jump, and
And
it
then
was
jump,
like
jump.
and jump, jump, and then she'd have to say however number she jumped, and it was just whole.
Oh.
It was a big thing. It was
Right.
interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was like one of the first times I saw someone with
Mm-hmm.
severe tics. That I would say is debilitating because she's doing that all the time. You can't hold a job,
Right.
so
Yeah.
something like that level would be very hard to deal with.
True.
Um, Another one is called echopraxia. I do this one a lot, actually, now that I think about it. It's an
Ah.
involuntary repetition or imitation of another person's actions.
Okay.
Um, so you're imitating their facial or their body, but it's also again, this one's very rare, but they're also unaware that they're doing it. It's involuntary and automatic.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
Copropraxia is the urge to perform obscene gestures without control. So you might be flipping someone off and not aware that you're flipping someone off.
Ah. Okay. A lot of this is people, they don't even know that it's happening,
Yeah,
right?
they're unaware.
They
Yeah.
don't know it. Right.
And then mental coprolalia are obscenities through a thought obsessively. So you might be thinking a swear word constantly for uncontrollable reasons. And then
Okay.
copographia is the urge to write down these expressions or obscenities involuntarily. So you might be writing in your homework paper, and then you got the obscene
You
word in
get
there.
the,
You're like,
yeah.
ooh, yeah. It's like,
You get
oh
a
no,
note
where's the
home
word
from the
now?
teacher, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I've
Ah,
I've actually experienced some of these. I don't have coprolalia, but I definitely can relate to a lot of the other ones. And it's very demeaning. It's very embarrassing when that happens,
of
especially if you
course.
don't know. And that's one thing that
What
surprised me
happened?
about it because I don't know I'm doing it.
Right.
Uh, the person is unaware because it's your autonomic motor system that's active or your vocal system that's active. So your
Hmm.
subconscious level is
Right.
working against you, basically.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's a trip. So as far as when you can expect it, I already said that you could be as young as toddler age.
Yeah.
Uh, Typically, the ticks emerge between age 5 and 7 years old,
Hmm.
and they ramp up. immensely around puberty. And
Okay.
then they can stay that way, or they can increase, or they could decrease. Everybody's unique. There's no way
Oh,
to
wow.
tell what it's going to do until it doesn't.
So you
Um,
can have something appear later on that wasn't in the beginning. Like you can have
yeah.
a new thing present itself
Oh
as
yeah.
well,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then the ticks, that's another thing. The ticks can change.
Hmm.
Um, so there's some people who have cyclical ticks, meaning they'll get a
Excuse me.
tick or a group of ticks that'll occur, and then it'll shift to another group, and then it'll just keep doing that throughout the year or over a few years. And some just have the same tick all the time. It's very unique. It is a trip how diverse the spectrum is of just ticks and what it looks like between everybody. There are no two people alike in this regard, that's for sure.
Yes.
Um, I already said they could change in frequency. As far as how prevalent is it, they found
Mhm.
that 1 in 5 school-age children will have a tick disorder. Um,
Wow.
where 1 in 50 in the United States, and then overall the number is right now 1 in 160 will be diagnosed with it every year. They haven't nailed down exactly where yet because there's a whole lot of areas that are impacted.
Hmm.
Um, when I first started learning about it, I don't know if you know a lot about the brain, but the basal ganglia is right in the center of your brain, and that's tied to your limbic system, which controls emotion, your flight, fright, and then it also controls your autonomic and your subconscious and conscious for your motor and vocal,
Okay.
which is why a lot of it's subconscious because the limbic system's in overdrive. Your basal ganglia is in overdrive, basically, um, in an unknown way.
Right.
Um,
Do emotions affect it
yeah,
since it's in
so
that
yeah,
area?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different triggers, what we call triggers, like just like
Hmm.
if someone had trauma, they have triggers. Same thing for the Tourette's disorder or other tic disorders, probably, but definitely Tourette's.
Hmm.
Um, because of the manner of how it's affected in the brain. On the top is my really horrible neurotransmitter. Typically, in a normal person, you have the dopamine neurotransmitters being released, and you have an equal number of receptors in theory to catch
Hmm.
the dopamine, and that causes like a motor action or vocal action. Your prefrontal and frontal cortex, you're thinking of doing that action, and it happens.
Okay.
So the top bar, I have two waves that occur. The top one's a normal person that there's so much pressure and stimulus or a thought that goes behind it, and it activates the neurotransmitter, sends the transmitter, comes back, resets, re-regulates, and waits for the next thought signal to happen. What
Okay.
happens in Tourette's is when our thresholds already starting lower. So we're often
Mm.
referred to as highly sensitive people. There's a reason for
Okay.
that. Is because our threshold for, like, say you touch me and you touch yourself, we're going to
Right.
feel it different. And it's going to, for me, not only does my threshold for activation occur a lot sooner than yours would, as far like a lot less trigger pressure, I'm
Hmm.
getting a flooded of dopamine, or I
Right.
have a flood of receptors, or the combination thereof. So I'm getting a whole wallop of neurotransmitters going move. But
Right.
because my sensor is already automatically triggered earlier, I'm getting that subconsciously. So something could be happening where any emotion trigger or sound trigger or touch trigger can set it off without your
Without you even
knowledge,
knowing.
and
Wow.
then it fires on its own automatically without your knowledge. That's what makes it the subconscious involuntary, because of the dysregulation in the dopamine pathway.
Okay.
Um, but that leads to what the next thing is, like, how do you treat it?
Right.
So to to backtrack real quick, Tourette's can occur by itself, but a lot of times it has what they call comorbid conditions, meaning you
Mm.
might have
Yes.
additional things you struggle with.
Okay.
ADHD and OCD are common, but there's a
Hmm.
bunch of other ones as well. You can have
Hmm.
anxiety, a learning disability, social skills, sensory processing. Everybody has sensory processing related to Tourette's, sleep
Right.
disorders, or functional neurological disorder. A lot of times you'll have comorbid conditions,
Okay.
which can make it even harder to treat.
Yeah.
So for Tourette's, the common treatments now are meditation. Um, what's new is deep brain stimulation for those who have a debilitating level.
Okay.
What they call comprehensive behavioral intervention for tics and speech therapies. Now, I haven't done deep brain stimulation. Mine's not severe, but
Mhm.
I have had all the other three.
So, is there a genetic component to Tourette's?
Yes, there is a genetic component, but they're still trying to identify the areas. I think there's more than one area that's involved,
Okay.
um, just due to the nature of Tourette's and how it impacts the brain and the dopamine pathways and the other pathways that feed into it. And I can get into that a little bit better later on.
Okay, great.
But what they found as far as prevalence in general is that Tourette's affects, tic disorders in general affect 1 in 5 children.
Wow.
And then 1 in 50 in US are diagnosed with a tic disorder. And the number is 1 in 160 are identified as having Tourette's every year. Um, and
That's
it
a high
most
number.
it is. It's
Yeah.
been it used to be like 1 in 1,000 when it was
Wow.
first discovered in 1970 by Dr. Guy de la Tourette, and it's as understanding grew, that number becomes more normal to what it actually is.
Hmm.
It affects the ticks affect all races, ethnic groups, and ages, but it's more prevalent in boys. It is not genetically only, obviously not limited to boys, and it's not
Hmm.
on the boys' chromosome, at least not only on the boys' chromosome. If it is, they're still trying to
Just a
identify
higher
all that.
number.
Yeah, because if it was
Okay.
only boys, then it would be on the boy chromosome. But
Right.
it's they have a higher number in general for the ticks. And then they
Hmm.
found that females on the flip side generally have a higher number of OCD.
Interesting.
So there's an inverse relationship that they've discovered.
Wow.
Yeah. Um, and just because you have a family member with it doesn't mean you're going to necessarily pass it on or have it yourself.
Right.
Although there is a genetic component, it does run in families. Um, they've had studies where they've done identical twins and one has it and one doesn't. So that's how
Okay.
they know it's not all genetic, that there's environmental factors as well,
Hmm.
um, and other things that contribute to it.
Interesting. At what
They've
age were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed at age 10, but I started showing symptoms as early as probably 7, 8 years old.
Okay.
I had like vocal tics with grunting and sniffing, and they thought it was allergies. So of
Hmm.
course, at the allergy shots nightmare,
Gosh.
with my
Yeah.
siblings. Oh,
Hmm.
that didn't help. So then when that didn't help, they realized that something else is going on. And I would have like the battery of tests to rule out epilepsy and all the other conditions that can be diagnosed with screening and scans and stuff. So I had uh, an EEG to rule out epilepsy. Back then
Hmm.
it was, they used to
Oh.
put the paste. I remember it still like, I can't get it out of my hair. So they would put the
Oh.
electrodes with the pins, and they would
Okay.
paste it on your head with thick, tacky paste that you can't,
Uh,
takes forever to get out. And you have to lay down. So you're laying down on these pins, and OMG, that
yes.
hurt.
Oh.
I did not like that exam. So now they have this fancy little hat with the electrodes, and they don't need
Wow.
to have the paste or the needle. So it's a lot nicer now. Um,
Yeah.
if only, right?
Right. And you were kind of in the beginning when they
I was
first
in
were
the very
learning about
beginning.
it, right?
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed, it was still early on, and not a lot
Hmm.
of doctors knew about it. We actually had to drive a couple hours to
Hmm.
a neurologist who was just learning about it. So, and it part of that also meant that there was no treatment. There was very limited understanding, and there was no treatments available because it was
Right.
so novel. So what happens is with that treatment, um, you would do what's called an off-label use of drugs, and they would experiment with different drugs to try and see
Uh,
what worked because it was so
they
new.
didn't know.
They
Right.
didn't know how the brain was impacted. They didn't know any of the stuff that they know now, where they could do more targeted treatments.
Right.
So like
And each person's
nowadays,
different too, like
and
you said.
everybody's different. Right. So everybody's different. Their responses to the
Yeah.
medicines were different. So there was just so much going into it that made it so difficult early on to take care
Yeah.
of. Because Tourette's was early on, there was no real understanding of how it affected the brain, so but they didn't know how to treat it. So everything treatment-wise was an experiment. And that was a living nightmare, but I'll get
Yeah.
into that a little bit more.
Right.
But now they have several different areas that they can treat for it. So they have what's called comprehensive behavior intervention for tics. So
Hmm.
you can learn how to redirect it sometimes, not always, but sometimes you can move it from one area to another part of your body or vocalization.
Hmm.
Um, like if I'm feeling a vocal tic, I might start humming.
Oh,
So
okay.
it'll take that
You'll,
energy away, but in a more suitable way if I feel it coming on.
okay.
Um,
So
but
you
because
can
it's
sense some
usually
of it, right?
it
Some.
sometimes
Okay.
if I'm approaching a highly triggered state or overwhelmed state, I can feel some of it coming on. A
Okay.
lot of the little motor tics I'm not aware of,
Hmm.
but which trips me up because I'm not aware I'm doing them. Someone's like, "Why are you looking at me like that?" I'm like, "I'm not doing anything."
Oh,
But
yeah.
But if I feel it, like if I'm really scrunching my nose, I'm doing this on
Yeah.
purpose now, but if I'm
Right.
really scrunching my nose, I can feel it. I might like start tapping my hand to
Mhm.
just shift the energy away from my face. And sometimes it works.
Okay. Great.
Um, for those who have debilitating level of Tourette's and other disorders, they have what's now called deep brain stimulation. And that's a new treatment that they're experimenting with. They might be further along than I realized, but so it stimulates the areas of the brain to um, prevent the tics or lower the
Okay.
tics is what it's supposed to do. There's a lot more medications available now than there were before, and
Yes.
also speech therapies. So if you have um, tics that are involve your mouth, they might bring you to therapy. When I was in school, I had medication side effects that would affect my speech, so I had to go to
Right.
therapy for ways
Hmm.
to maneuver around it is to not trigger it. That was so much fun.
No. Yeah.
But there's a lot of different treatments now, so that's good. So
Yes.
that's very promising in that regard.
Yeah,
And
and
then
even how much research is being done and new things that have come out just
yeah,
shows you how much more people are really trying to advocate for it, which is great.
and also to reduce the advocate for it both for self-care as well as reduce the stigma
Yes,
and allow people to be successful in life. Like
exactly.
I'm highly successful, um, and there's a lot of others that are highly successful, but there are those who have it to a debilitating level. And by advocating, those of us who can, we advocate for those who can't, and
Right.
also to help reduce the stigma and to bring awareness. What is it? What am I looking at?
Exactly. Yeah.
And to
I
let
mean,
people know I'm not aware of what my face is looking like. I mean, there's a
right.
famous meme like, I ignore my face and listen to my words. There's a reason for that.
Yes,
It's
right.
like,
So, with that said, when you first were diagnosed, you really didn't know yourself much about it, right?
I
Um, did
I
you?
didn't even know I had it. Well, when I was diagnosed, and they might have told me, and I don't remember, it's possible.
Right.
I'm a kid, you
Well,
know,
yeah, you were
you're
young.
rattling off
Yeah.
terms I don't know. But when all I remember is doing allergy shots and then going to the doctors and being in the hospital for a week for an unknown reason to me. And
Right.
then all of a sudden I'm on medication.
Right.
And I'm like, why do I need this? And I'm being told I need it. Like,
Yeah.
okay. So the so it was very difficult initially. So growing up with Tourette's, I'm going to ask my own question. So what was it like growing
Right.
up?
Yeah.
Um, before the diagnosis, typical kid, no issues that I'm aware of. Had friends, played da 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 da, did
Yeah.
silly crafts and stuff. When I started out at school, I did okay, like any other kid at
Right.
school. But when I started the medication, everything started shifting. Um, the first medication, like I mentioned earlier, it was all off label and they didn't know how the brain was impacted. So they were just, let's try this one today.
Experiments.
Throwing a
Yeah,
dart at the
basically.
board and go, okay, let's try
Yeah.
this one. So, and that was a nightmare. I have to say, being honest.
You had to be in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first one I was on was called clonidine, and that is on label. It's used to treat high blood pressure.
Oh, wow.
Now, back then as a kid, I didn't have high blood pressure.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine what's happening. My blood pressure's tanking. So here I am. I'm getting dizzy in class.
Hmm.
I'm passing out sometimes
Right.
because I'm tired all the time because my blood pressure's tanking.
Right.
And that didn't help with the ticks either. So it was
No.
like, okay, next one on the list. So
Right.
I did that one for maybe a year or two until they found another one to play with. So then they were started playing with the class called antipsychotics.
Okay.
Um, so they would use Haldol, which is commonly used to treat schizophrenia.
Right.
So since the acetylcholine medicine didn't work, that pathway didn't work, they tried the dopamine pathway, and this schizophrenia is the dopamine pathway.
Hmm.
So they noticed with those who had severe tics, the dosages seemed that the dosage they started around half the dose of what they would give for a schizophrenic patient.
Okay.
Um, for a kid. Look, I went back and looked all this up years later and stuff, but they would start you at half the dose of a
Mhm.
schizophrenic patient and throw the dart and say, will this work?
See if it worked. Yeah.
For
Oh my
those with
goodness.
severe tics, it helped a bit. For me,
Right. Not so much. Yeah.
no. So, and the problem with the antipsychotic medication class, because the dopamine affects your motor pathways, um, if you give too much, you end up on the opposite spectrum. So you end up with like Parkinsonism type effect. So you get
Mm,
a tremor, you get
right.
shuffle legs, you can't move, you get into uh, uh, not a a medical stupor. You're basically in a
Right.
stupor. You can't think straight,
Right.
or you're not no effect, and you're amped up. You're
Hmm.
ticking anyway, so you're moving
Right.
anyway. But the in between was where the nightmare is because if it's the wrong medication for you or too much medication for you, which was the case for me in all of these,
Right.
um, you would have the side effects that would just can be
Affect you.
debilitating themselves.
Yeah.
So what they have what's called like dystonic reactions or extrapyramidal symptoms, which are like complex tics. So you're like shrugging your shoulders or you're doing a contortion, but that can
Hmm.
mirror someone's tic.
Right.
So you can imagine I'm entering puberty, which was when it's expected to increase, and I'm on
Right.
this
And so you're,
medicine,
which is
but I'm
making
having
more.
but I'm having side effects to the medication, but they think it's the tick. So they're
Right.
giving me more medication,
Oh my
which is making
goodness.
more side effects. So now I'm like having what looks like grand mal seizures in class, and I'm on the
Right.
floor flipping out,
Uh,
and no one knows what's going on. So they give me medications to counter the
Other
symptom.
medication. Right.
Instead of lowering it or taking me off because there's no other treatment, they're giving me different medication. So I'm on like cogentin to
Hmm.
counter the grand mal seizure type of spasm,
Right.
but I'm still in the stupor. I'm still losing function of my body. Like I can't walk. I have what's
Right.
called lockjaw sometimes.
Hmm.
Can you? So I have a thing I'll play where you can hear like the quick shift just in the talking.
Hmm.
Um, there was one time I was at a roller rink,
Hmm.
and you might have heard this story, but there was one time I was
Yes.
at a roller rink where I'm skating around and they had just changed my medicine again. Different class of antipsychotic, but same deal.
Yep.
And my legs get stiff. And now
Mm.
I don't know if you've ever roller skated,
You,
you need your legs to
you
move in
need your
order to
legs.
move.
Yes.
And I'm
Yes.
like, I can't move. And then all of a sudden, I can't talk. And then
Hmm.
I can't talk. And they think I'm being like Pee Wee Herman or something. I'm like,
Right.
what the heck is going on with my body? Right. And it was very
Right.
scary because you're a kid, you don't
You don't know
understand.
what's going on.
Yeah,
Right.
so I'm like crying. I can't move. I
Aw.
can't talk. I can't. And then it affected my breathing. So then now
Mm.
they had to rush me to the hospital because it was affecting my diaphragm.
Yep.
And that became my hell basically for a few years while I was on this medicine because the different medications and the different doses, sometimes that cascade would happen slowly.
Hmm.
Sometimes it would happen within minutes or an
Right.
hour. So a lot of times when they shifted my medicine to the nighttime, I was having that happen at night. So I was
Oh,
having trouble breathing
you
and
can't
moving.
breathe.
My whole body is in like one tight spasm. I
Hmm.
can't move. I can't cry out for help. And I don't know what's going on, so I don't know how to describe it. So I'm just like,
You
can I
just,
please get off this medicine? I don't feel good on it. And
yeah,
I'm being told no, I need it. And I'm like feeling helpless and helpless because
you're
I feel
living
like I'm
it.
in total hell and I can't
Oh,
breathe. And this is every night. And
yeah.
then in the daytime, I got the lockjaw and the stiff legs. So now I have the opposite spectrum because I took the counter medicine. So
Hmm.
now I'm like up Parkinson level. So I'm going from
Right.
overload to Parkinson level. And it's like, you know,
It's a lot.
my grades tanked because I can't think.
Right.
I can't move. I missed a lot of class because I'm now, in therapy because I can't talk. How
Right.
can I talk to you so you can hear me talk and I can't remember? I mean, can you just imagine trying to do school?
Right.
And so I lost a lot of friends around that time, and then I had to be babysat a lot, which caused a lot of resentment for those who had to watch me. At least I felt like they resented me for a bit because they had to watch me. And it was very embarrassing and very sad and frustrating and a very helpless feeling.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do about it. Like, because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why I was on it. I
Right.
was unaware of a lot of my symptoms, but I was aware of the side effects because they felt different.
Right.
But you can't, how do you explain that? So I'm
Right.
advocating now for those who are listening, if you yourself are on medication for Tourette's or even anything else, or if you're in charge of someone and responsible for them on medication, to listen, to really listen, because they're not doctors. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a kid.
Right.
I don't know how to tell you my whole body's frozen and I can't breathe and I'm having a catatonic level response because I'm a kid
Hmm.
and I don't know these terms. I
Right.
didn't learn this until well after college and I looked it all up.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so to kind of listen, watch and listen and journal what's happening. So I wanted to play. So an example of advocating is video is better if you
Okay.
can, um, because the motion and the movement can tell the doctor a lot. So like, because there's a difference between like a head bob or a
Right.
tremor or
Right.
this, like
Hmm.
even like if this is a tick and then I
Right.
stop doing it and all of a sudden I'm like this, that could
Right.
be a whole different, I'm
A
forcing it
different
now just
thing.
as an example, but that could be a whole different medical response,
Hmm.
which means they need to treat it differently because
Okay.
one could be too much meds, one could be not enough meds, a combination, or just something completely different. And you can have interference with other medications you're on. I mean, there's a whole gamut of how to advocate for yourself. But I wanted to play. So I was recording. I just changed new medications. So here's a recording if you can hear it. I'm going to fast forward a little bit because I'm documenting what I did, what I took, what my experience was. But I want you to just hear how quick the shift is from me talking normal to I'm starting to have trouble. And
Right.
it's like that. So let
Okay.
me, can you hear that?
Woke up a little bit, but slept well.
Hmm.
I'm waking up. I'm
Starting to have trouble.
shuffling my feet. Hard to talk. I can think clearly, and
Can you hear
hard
that?
to talk. And my right hand is swelling, and I have tingling in my mouth, my left cheek, and my left arm. Need to know how to describe this. Uh, so that if I ever need medication, what to put on my medical chart and on an alert card so that they don't give me too much, one, and then two, preferably don't give me anything at all.
You
And
can
if
hear that,
they
right?
have to give me anything that they know to monitor for potential severe side effects, so automatically because I'm really sensitive to medicine. So what's the best way to capture that information for both myself and the doctors so that it's communicated clearly? Question for the doctor. So I was awake mentally about 6:30 this morning, but my body needed more rest, so I went back to sleep, woke up at 8:30, same thing, body still really tired and tingly, so I went back to sleep and I got up at 10:30. I'm awake, but I'm still having difficulty getting around. My body feels weak and I need a force to move, to be able to walk around and move. I had taken one olanzapine and two Benadryl last night about, was it 10 o'clock p.m.? Right. Around 9 p.m. and went to bed. The night before, I had taken one olanzapine and one Benadryl. I had intermittent sleep, but good sleep, was able to function okay during the day. Am I missing anything for yesterday? You felt a little sad. I felt short pockets of sadness and hand tremor, several times. But it didn't last long. I had trouble talking or thinking together with that. So maybe half-hour pockets around 12 noon and then around 6 o'clock. Did I take a Benadryl at 12? Or I don't remember. I think I took a Benadryl. I took a chewable Benadryl at around noon when I was having two children's dose chewable at
You can hear it degrading a
noon
little.
because of the tremors. And then at 6, I was having a little bit of a reaction, but I didn't take any Benadryl then. And then at night, I took the one Olanza with the two Benadryl, and I woke up feeling
And after that last bout of sadness, you felt better.
Yeah. After the second bout at 6 p.m., I went to the store. I felt okay. I didn't drive. I'm not driving. Yeah. But just to note
Listen.
the difference in the 2 days and the types of dosage. I'm not sure if the swelling and stuff and the weakness is okay or not, medicine-wise, or a reaction to the medicine. But I certainly don't like it. I can't function. I can't draw. I'm getting shit. I'm getting a mouth thing going. This is just throwing you on. This is not right. I'm getting that mouth thing again.
The luck.
Where I need Benadryl. I get that upside down fan falling down.
So
Yeah.
can you hear that? And
You
that was
can
just
hear
4
the-
minutes.
Yeah.
That was just over 4 minutes time. I'm talking.
And all
I
of a
started
sudden
out
it's just
I
kinda-
started out with the tremor, and then it started ramping up. It got real bad after that.
Wow.
Like I had to do multiple doses, and we actually ended up changing the medication again because that one clearly
And
wasn't
that was a
working.
new one that you just started, right?
That was a new one. So I described it as sensitive, okay, because I didn't know how to describe it. So when I started out the medication, I'm telling the doctor I'm very sensitive to medications. I don't want to take any antipsychotics. I had
Right.
a hellish time. It almost killed me. The first time I was on it, it almost killed me. I ended up in the
Right.
hospital in withdrawal and stuff. And it brought me to such a sense of hopelessness. I wanted to die. I mean, it was so
Right.
bad. But the first time he gave me 5, he's like, usually they give you like 800 mgs or some crazy dose. I'm like,
Right.
what's the lowest that exists? And
Right.
he's like, a 10 meg. I'm like, cut that in half.
But yeah.
Cut that in half, literally.
Right.
Give me the half of the lowest dose that exists and let me try it. And you monitor me because I don't know what you call all this, but I know it's not normal. So
Right.
they gave me 5 mg and it was fine. So then the next day he bumps it to
Get it a little
10,
bit higher. Yeah.
and literally grand mal, the whole
Oh,
cascade within half an hour. Grand mal seizure type level, not having a seizure, but I look like it.
right. Your
Whole
body
body
just,
tight. I can't talk. I could barely breathe. They have to give me the counter medication right away. And that took half a day to just bring me to where I can move, I can sit up.
right.
And then I still didn't have function of my legs. I had to be in a wheelchair that day because
Oh
my
my
legs didn't
goodness.
come back yet. And that's like, it can be really crazy. You lose function of your
Definitely.
body because it reacts differently in your brain, and you just don't know how you're going to react.
You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
What part of you is
So
going
it
to be
took it
affected?
took 2 days to get function in my legs back. So we went back to 5 mg.
Mm.
So we did 5 mg for a week, and I started having dystonia again. So then I was
Ah,
taking that's why I was talking about Benadryl. So
right.
Benadryl was one of the medications I would take to counteract
Whatever the
the
effect is.
medication that was. And it helped a little bit, but not enough. So then I
Mm,
had to try a completely different medication because that one clearly was not, it was too much for me.
right.
But I would do um audio journals because I didn't have a phone that had I had a flip phone. I didn't have a phone that had a camera on. So I was able to take voice recordings at the time, which is why I got that recording.
Still hopeful,
Um,
right?
but you can hear the transition. So I'm like showing this to my doctor. I'm going this, and I'm describing the physical symptoms, and he goes, "Okay, clearly that won't work."
Right.
So when you're advocating for yourself and others, I strongly recommend doing a journal,
Yeah.
keeping track of what your symptoms are, tick-wise,
Yep.
what medications you're taking, what dose and when, what you're even eating, because sometimes some foods can make it
It could
worse. Some
trigger it.
people,
Oh, wow.
food allergies can trigger it, high emotional states, good or bad, can trigger it. And then
Hmm.
if you have any sensory issues, a high sensory overload, like I don't like really busy. I'm not gonna break her thing. I don't like really busy atmospheres because that triggers me.
Yeah.
Um, so you got to kind of learn what works for you,
Hmm.
um, and then go from there.
Go from there.
And
Just,
yeah,
yeah.
go from there. And then be in
It-
constant contact with your doctor as you're maneuvering things, and always monitor yourself because things change. And
right.
that was one of the things. So growing up, back to growing up, um, as far as the ticks and stuff, one of the things that surprised me that I didn't know, that I learned later on, was how it changes. So
Uh,
not only is it unique, um, for the each
per person.
individual, but it changes for the individual. But like
Wow.
puberty was hell.
Right.
And then it lowered. So I went to severe and
Hmm.
debilitating, but some of that was the medicine. And then it
Right.
dropped down to mild to moderate.
Tolerate.
And then in college, I had a upswing for a short
Hmm.
stint. And then when I was pregnant, I almost had no ticks. It was great. That was like the
Wow.
best. I had like a 3 month period that was like totally awesome. I was felt normal. And I'm like, why can't
Ah.
this be this all the time? But then when I stopped nursing, OMG,
Yeah.
it kicked up like puberty. So
Right.
I'm giving you a forewarning if you're a female, just because I wasn't on any medication um since I hit my lowest point and I wanted to
Okay.
die. I hit my lowest point, and because I felt so helpless with the medicine. And then after that, I prayed and I met Jesus, and um, prayed for help dealing with it. And then I started being old enough to work with the doctor to get off the medicine. So I
Right.
was medicine free almost from high school, with the exception of a short period in college. Um, all the way through maybe a few years ago. I was
Oh,
medicine
wow.
free. So it was mild to moderate with just minor triggers of
Mhm.
ticks, but they weren't anything worth going on medicine because I still
Because you
have
saw the
issues with,
difference, right?
and I still have issues with medicine.
Right.
So finding one that was worth taking, depending
Hmm.
on how annoying the ticks were they
Right.
causing a dysfunction? And I only went on it for a short stint in college because it was in my diaphragm again. So the ones that affect my breathing, I need to have something because I can't,
Yeah.
you need to breathe.
You need to breathe.
So-
It's important.
but after nursing, and then when I hit perimenopause, date me a little bit. So when I started
Excuse me.
entering menopause, it kicked up like with a vengeance, and so I had to go on medicine in order to manage it because it was disrupting my life. I
Right.
wasn't able to do my work because my hands constantly doing this, and then it was affecting my breathing and my back
Right.
and walking. So I'm on medication again, but I'm on one that is tolerable, thankfully. Um, but I'm still doing my journal, and I
Right.
monitor,
You found
and then
other techniques too.
oh yeah, so I've learned how to redirect a little bit sometimes. So like I'll hum or I'll tap on a table if it's in my leg and I need to walk somewhere or something,
Right.
stuff like that. Um, and then I tried biofeedback, but that didn't work for me. I did
Each
probably need to
person's
do it
different.
longer. But yeah, everybody's different. You just gotta find
Test
out
it
what
out.
works for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. Um, have you ever met other people who have had Tourette's?
I have. Ironically, the first time I met someone, I was doing I volunteered to be a patient for a genetic study for
Oh,
Tourette's when
nice.
I
Okay.
was in college. So I hadn't met anybody up through college. And then I met a gentleman named John who was
Hmm.
doing the study as well. So
Okay.
I had, and it's supposed to be because it's patients, it's confidential. So I
Right.
was like talking to the doctor. I'm like, hey, are there anybody else here that's doing this who has it? I've never met anybody.
Hmm.
And he's like, yeah, there's a few. It's like, would you mind asking them if they're willing to meet me? I really wanted to meet someone else who had it because I was felt very isolating. I didn't know anybody growing up, and I got bullied a lot growing up,
Excuse me.
and
Hmm.
lost a lot of friends because they didn't understand it.
Right.
I had, crazy nicknames, Tasmanian Devil, Spaz Attack,
Right.
you name it, I probably heard it.
Aw.
Um, and that made relationships and friendships and even home life sometimes very difficult because you don't understand what's going on for
Right.
the individual and they don't understand what's going on. So, you could
Correct.
just imagine how well that worked out.
Yeah.
But when I met him, he only had a vocal tick. He agreed to meet. He was an older gentleman who was a teacher, and he agreed to meet me. And so I walked in and introduced myself, and we had a good conversation. We actually hit it off. We're good
Hmm.
friends still to this day.
Awesome.
Um, and I actually met other people through him. So John and I met Adam and Christian at a Tourette's conference, which I went to the conference with John.
Hmm.
He actually lived a few hours away. So I meet up with him periodically. Just he was just into science. So we were talking science and stuff.
Okay.
Um, and just talking about Tourette's and being each other's support system.
Nice.
And then I ended up joining the local support group, and a bunch of us were co-authors of a book called Don't Think About Monkeys.
Oh, wow.
So just to introduce the title of it, there's like an old shaman story where um, someone wanted to learn how to be a Buddhist or some religion.
Okay.
And the guy's like, okay, in order to do that, you have to not think about monkeys.
Mm.
So go home, because he was like, how do you do this? How do you do
Right.
mantras or whatever? And he's like, don't think about monkeys. So sure enough, the guy goes home and he's thinking about monkeys.
Just
And
all of it.
the more he tries not to, the more he's thinking about monkeys.
Hmm.
And we use that title because that's like an example of the ticks. The more you're aware you're ticking, the more you try and stop it, the worse it gets. Because
Yes.
you're concentrating, and it goes in the complete opposite direction of what you want.
Right.
So we felt that was an appropriate title. So myself and the others who are in this book are talking about our lives and what it was like to grow up and have Tourette syndrome.
Hmm.
And it's really a good spectrum of people because you have young through a lot older generation, and the older generation had already gone through school and everything and were adults and in the workforce with
Right.
something that everybody's like, what's wrong with you? Because there was no knowledge of it back then.
Right. It was new.
Yeah. So to finally, like some of them were like, to finally have a diagnosis felt so good. To have
Yeah.
a name to what it was that was causing their body to freak out, brought healing. Um,
Yes.
and then, so I did the co-author of the book with John and Adam and Christian, and then um, did some other things with Adam. When I moved out to California, I did some educational videos with Adam in California for
Oh, wonderful.
doctors and students. And then with John, I did a radio interview about Tourette syndrome during Tourette Syndrome Awareness Month,
Oh,
ironically.
great.
So
See?
now I'm doing a podcast.
So you are advocating full circle.
Right, right. And then when I also moved out here, not only did I join the local support group, I was actually co-facilitator of that group with my friend Janet.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
I had joined the Northern California chapter as a board member. So I was a
Oh,
fundraiser coordinator for a year for the Northern California chapter. And I was also, while I was working full time, and that's important to know, while I was doing
yes.
variable shift,
Very,
which is taxing,
yes.
and
Uh,
working full time, I'm one of the emergency contacts for support. So, like if someone was in
Wonderful.
crisis or if they were needing information, as one of the board members, we had to take turns being a contact. So I got flooded with calls
Uh,
all the time. I could
Ooh,
not believe how many like how I'd be on the phone for hours the days that were my days, and it
it
was
shows
so
you how
taxing.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was wonderful and emotionally taxing at the same time because you want so much to jump through the phone, give them a
And
hug,
hug them. Yeah.
and go, I'm with you, I hear you, and you can't. So I
Right.
could only use my words and give examples of how I dealt with things and listen to them and give them information and direct them to like lawyers or educational help. And lead into the national page, and then they could
Hmm.
join the support group for their area because they had
Hmm.
not too many, but enough support groups where they were peppered around.
Okay.
But
Okay.
they weren't wide enough spread yet because it was still new.
Right.
Even
People are
though
still
it's been
learning
20 years,
everything.
it's only been 20 years, so it's still
Right.
new.
So you're not only just a support person for them, but you also have to try to help them advocate for themselves as well as yourself. What are some challenges that you face?
That's true. So while I was part of the board member and the facilitator and stuff, I really wanted to be able to be for that person and emotionally and physically you wanted to reach out and give them a hug and stuff like I said,
Yeah.
but you can't. So you can only give them information and then let them know if it's someone struggling with it, shared experiences, because someone who doesn't have it isn't necessarily going to understand the what we call a tick premonition. Sometimes we get it, we feel the buildup in our body sometimes
Hmm.
or the OCD release, if you do the tick just right, sometimes
Right.
I call it a OCD tick. I don't know if there's a better name for it, but
Right.
so someone with it's going to understand, sorry, um,
That's okay.
someone with Tourette's is going to understand that more than someone who doesn't have it, for example.
Right.
So one of the difficulties I found was dealing with parents of kids, um, with it because and I'm not putting them down. I'm not saying they don't have a right to be frustrated,
They
but
just don't understand.
it was very difficult for me to listen to them vent and listen to them all their frustrations and like, oh my God, I can't stand when they do that, or how do I deal with this? Because their experience
Personal.
is different than mine. So
Yes.
I'm owning it like I'm feeling the shame as the
Right.
person with it. I'm feeling a lot of that shame and I'm taking that on, which I shouldn't take on. And that
Right.
was very emotionally draining.
Hmm.
Um, and I wasn't able to support them as well as I would want to have. I can
Hmm.
share them my experience, but only to a point. So
Right.
what we in that regard, when I realized I was having that difficulty, as well as the other person like me who had Tourette's, found herself having similar experiences and feeling frustrated with the parents. So we ended up separating the support group into two groups.
Oh,
We ended
good.
up supporting it into those with and those who were parents of. And then we
Perfect.
had facilitators who were parents of and those with, and that worked out so much better.
Definitely.
And then we also separated the calls out that way too. And that was a lot better to navigate
Which
experientially.
mindset, right?
Which mindset, because then I'm not owning as much of it. I'm
Hmm.
able to sympathize and empathize with the person with Tourette's and
Right.
not take on the shame like I was taking on by listening to the parents
Right.
verbalize their frustration and the ich and I wish they weren't born. And
Right.
so you're like hearing all this and you don't realize, at least I was taking it on and not realizing between things that were said to me in my youth, like I
Right.
should never have been born, I'm a waste of
Right.
space, I'm a spaz attack, I'm a freak. And you're hearing
Right.
these parents say it as an adult. And if
It's
you're
triggers, right?
reliving, it's triggering and you don't realize it's triggering because I hadn't done any heart work yet. I
Right.
hadn't healed from all my garbage from growing up with it and all the struggles I had with the medicines and relationships.
Yeah.
And that's been more of a recent journey for me. So as far as how I'm advocating, that's how we advocated and we split it up and that worked out better. But also now how I'm advocating for myself and others now is by doing my own heart work and the
Hmm.
importance, realizing the importance of doing your own healing first and then being able to share that experience, that healing journey. So I'm actually working on a book where I'm going to talk about that healing journey
Oh, wonderful.
as well. So I'll let you know when that's ready.
Ah, I can't
but
wait.
but that's been a very cathartic journey in itself. And
Yes.
what I'm coming to just recently realize is I'm storing a lot of that stuff in my body. And
Mm.
I used to do deep massage and I realized that I guess there might be even a link.
Hmm.
There's something that's being investigated, like fibromyalgia. They have like cysts and stuff.
Right.
When they were doing deep massage, it was a trip because they would massage a spot that was like a cyst like thing, and I'd have a
Right.
memory come out of nowhere. I'm like,
Oh,
oh, whoa, that was
wow.
trippy. And it's like, just let it go, let it go. So, but all those areas that they worked on and those memories that were let go, there's no cyst there anymore.
You
So
see?
they're actually investigating that. Are those cysts stored trauma? So,
Mm.
so now I'm looking into potential somatic healing work. I'm looking into that now. That's like the latest thing that just literally last week. So
Wow.
there's a book called Body Keeps Score I want to read.
Hmm.
I'm hoping that this next level of my healing journey will be very fruitful.
Yeah.
But as far as advocating in general, like I said, when I was growing up, I had a lot of people bully me and harassing. But I came across that as well in the workplace.
Mm.
And
Yes.
that was a trip because you don't expect adults to act like
Adults,
that.
right? Yeah.
And most people were pretty cool, but there's still those few
There's always
that,
the,
there's always
yeah.
those few. And I learned that the hard way growing up that there's just a few people that just are going to be buttheads.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I wish I could, enlighten them.
They
Maybe
got
this
their
will
own
enlighten
healing
them.
work they have
But
to
they have
do,
their own healing. Exactly. They have
right?
their own healing work. And maybe that's just who they are character wise. But
Yeah.
I had to learn how to navigate that in the workplace and when to speak up. Sometimes
Right.
speaking up made it worse, and
Yeah.
that's common with anything. Sad
Hmm.
to say, but that's life.
That's it. Yeah.
Um, so you have to kind of figure out what works for you and do your own
Hmm.
healing journey and make sure you advocate for yourself and others in that way. So that's all I do. I continue to use my life experience. I'll give my experiences on like the Tourette's forum or other support pages. I'll share my
Hmm.
experience. And if someone's having what sounds like a medical side effect, I'll share my experience. So like, hey, look into this, ask your
Right.
doctor, check this out, go to this website, here's some information. So I'll
It's,
share part of my journey with them, and that's cathartic in that sense, both for me and them.
yeah, you get
And
the
then,
release part of it and
yeah,
educate at the
and
same
help.
time.
And
Yeah.
then by being, talking on forums
Yeah.
like this, and then also by doing creative work. So I write a lot of poetry,
Hmm.
and like I said, I'm working on other stuff. So just by being creative, that helps be an outlet as well,
Oh,
an emotional outlet. So that's also helpful.
No, that's great. So, I mean, you've done a lot. You continue to, carry on your advocacy that you're doing for everybody. I
Mhm.
like that you're writing another book. It'll
Yeah,
be interesting to compare the younger version versus now, right?
yeah,
To see any differences. Even if it's a different style book, it doesn't matter. They're still different, right?
yeah, yeah.
um, that you've learned and gone through a lot since the poetry, I'm sure, is beautiful. I would love to show some of it if anything is
Sure.
available. Um,
Not
I
yet.
know,
Working on it.
yeah, when you're
Except
ready.
what's in the other book. There's
Okay,
some in the
when,
other book.
yes, when you're ready, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll do a whole podcast just about books.
There you go.
But so again, I want to just thank you so much for doing this, and it is to honor Tourette's Syndrome Awareness Month as well as Mental Health Month, and
Exactly. And
this
thank you
is
again for having me here.
important. Of course, thank you for sharing your personal story. I mean, like you said, everybody's unique, and each person has their own story that they can share, and that's kind of what
Right.
this is about, right?
Exactly,
Everybody,
exactly.
everybody learning from each other, and I know there's going to be people who watch this today who've never heard of it, and just
Right.
knowing that we've educated a little bit, it's worth it, right?
Exactly.
So, I do want to find out more about this from you. So, if I could invite you again on another future podcast and we can discuss more about it and any other things that you would
Absolutely.
like.
I would definitely like that. I'd like to talk about maybe a little more how I advocate medically
Yeah,
from that point of view, because I try to get into it a little bit, realize it's too big a topic in it's
yeah.
its own thing. So that would be something I'd look forward to sharing more of in the
Oh,
future.
okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much.